biggest problem that people face when they want to believe is fear.
It's not about the Protestant faith, it's not about the Catholic faith.
In North America, I think our definition of faith is really skewed.
Thank you for stopping by. You're listening to SplitLights, a podcast where talk is cheap, but conversation is priceless. Each podcast examines a chosen topic from different points of view, shining a variety of lights on the subject, exploring a spectrum of thoughts. Our intent is not to reach a conclusion, but to inspire you to more conversation, more research, more exploration. This is SplitLights, podcast number 1. Wars have been fought over it. Families have divided over it. And many have given their lives rather than deny it. Faith is a mysterious force in the life of humanity. I'm David McGinnis, and faith affected my family in a variety of ways. For my grandfather, faith was something that you served. It was something that you dedicated yourself to. My grandfather adhered to the Roman Catholic faith, attended Mass regularly, and expected the same kind of dedication from the rest of his family. So, when his son, my father, met, fell in love, and eventually married a Protestant woman, he was extremely disappointed. So much so that he disowned his son. He did not attend my father's wedding. He did not attend family get-togethers to meet with the grandkids, and did not even speak with my father for many years. As a result, I never really knew my grandfather. My grandfather's faith was a roadblock to a relationship with his son, daughter-in-law, and grandchildren. So, as a child, I saw faith as a type of force that motivated people's actions, shaping their choices. I didn't always see it as a force for good. As I grew older, faith would take on a broader meaning. I began to see faith as more than just an impersonal force that caused people to act and react. This relationship with faith was a journey of discovery. I invite you to join me as we discover how 3 individuals from 3 different walks of life and vocations view the topic of faith. Perhaps we will provoke some thought that you can bring to bear as you progress on your own road to faith. Webster defines faith as, quote, belief and trust in and loyalty to God, belief in the traditional doctrines of a religion, a firm belief in something for which there is no proof, something that is believed, especially with strong conviction, unquote. The writer of the book of Hebrews found in the Bible suggests that faith is not only an abstraction, but that it is closely tied to your actions. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 14 through 16 says, quote, "What good is it, my brother and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but no deeds? Can such a faith save them? Suppose a brother and a sister is without clothes and daily food. If one of you says to them, 'Go in peace, keep warm and well fed,' but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead," unquote. This establishes that faith expresses itself in actions, something you do. If you have ever sat in a chair without thoroughly testing the weight-bearing strength of said chair, you have exercised that kind of doing faith. I caught up with retired Army Colonel Jim Lyman during a busy lunchtime at McDonald's to talk about his relationship with faith. For Jim, growing up in the small Eastern Oregon town of La Grande, faith was just something you did.
It was more of a process, well, I guess we've got to go to church, sit in that pew. Went through catechism, all the way through catechism. My mother served at the church, went every Sunday, and then we moved to Corvallis, and we still attended, St. Mary's there until I, got out of high school and went to service. So you went through the Mass, and of course, then you had to memorize, prayer, and in catechism, you learn, Old Testament, New Testament, but still it's a whole lot of rules and regulation.
This approach to faith as a set of rules to memorize and follow didn't inspire Jim enough to continue pursuing faith after he left home.
I got out of high school and went in the Air Force and was active duty in the Air Force for three and a half years. Never attended church, while I was in the Air Force.
Now remember that according to Webster, faith is, quote, belief and trust in and loyalty to God, unquote. This wasn't what Jim was experiencing. He went to church and did what he was told out of loyalty to his mom. He knew it mattered to her, but it didn't matter to him. So he stopped going when he no longer had to. Now fast forward about 35 years. Jim has graduated from college and is now an officer in the Army National Guard. While in the Guard, he meets a woman, Stacy, and falls in love. Stacy returns the affection, but is troubled by Jim's apparent lack of faith. That all changes one day on a bullet train headed to Frankfurt, Germany.
I was taking the train back to Frankfurt to get a military hop back into Afghanistan, and she gave me a little book, More Than a Carpenter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Stacy gave Jim the book, which is an account of author Josh McDowell's personal journey from actively opposing faith to complete faith in Jesus Christ. Stacy was hoping Jim would be inspired by the book to make that same journey.
And so I'm on this bullet train, 300 miles an hour, heading back to Frankfurt to go back into combat. I don't know, it must have been, 9, 10 o'clock at night, and I read that book. And I'll tell you, Dave, it was, it's divine intervention. It was a revelation, because all of a sudden I was just filled with the Holy Spirit. You can't really describe it and explain it, but all of a sudden there was nothing in the world that mattered. Not Stacy, not my parents, not the church, not combat, not my rank as a full colonel. Nothing in my life mattered. The only thing that mattered was Jesus.
That experience on the train motivated Jim to dive deeper and deeper into his faith.
So now it's not about the Protestant faith, it's not about the Catholic faith, it's about the relationship and being a disciple of Christ. And I will attend any church and listen to any sermon that I can, because I can't get enough of God. K-Love, Bible studies.
So, Jim Lyman is on a bullet train headed to Frankfurt, Germany, and experiences, as he describes it, as
divine intervention. It was a revelation.
As a result, Jim has a faith that motivates him to pursue God.
Because I can't get enough of God.
For another perspective on faith, I sat down with family counselor Jim Velez. Jim is a down-to-earth, well-respected counselor from Portland, Oregon, who has been helping individuals and families for many, many years.
I got into counseling for the desire to connect with people on a deeper level and to give practical answers to serious issues that they face in their lives.
That's Jim Velez. Now let me take you back to Webster again. Part of that definition is, quote, something that is believed, especially with strong conviction," unquote. Could that definition of faith be a potential problem?
Yeah, if you're not sensitive to where other people are coming from, and you see only from your own perspective, you can hurt people, because you can say, this is the way you should believe, this is the way you should adhere to this, and you can be adamant about that. And you have to be very, very careful that you don't hinder the relationship, because you can communicate values to people that you hold dear, but those values are caught more than they're taught.
I had heard that phrase before, caught more than they are taught. It means people learn values better by seeing them on display and lived out, rather than listening to someone just talk about what they believe. Jim Velez said that often people will get excited about their faith and want to talk about it a great deal, but they need to be aware of certain issues.
Well, sometimes people will push their belief or push their agenda because they honestly believe this is what they are called to do, and I will not fault them for that. But I would add to that if the only tool in your tool chest is a hammer, every problem or every person that you look at looks like a nail.
It's normal when we are convinced of a truth to want to tell other people about it, to make sure they know the truth as well. Humanity's perennial problem has been defining what is truth. What should I have faith in?
Well-meaning and well-intentioned people have put their faith in things they should never have put their faith in. Putting your faith in a person, you've got to be very, very careful about that. Numbers of people down through the centuries here have done that, put their faith in a person only to find out that that person deceived them or that person had ulterior motives.
In spite of the many examples of people being disillusioned by the person or belief system they had ascribed to, the desire to believe in something persists. Humans around the world seem to want to place their faith in something. Where does that motivation come from? Psychologist Justin Barrett, PhD at Oxford University, observes that people have a bias for believing in the supernatural. Barrett's research leads him to generalize that humanity's basic cognitive equipment leads to thinking about a pre-life, an afterlife, gods, invisible beings that are doing things, themes common to most of the world's religions. His conclusion implies that our need to believe, to have faith in someone greater than ourselves, is hardwired into us. I started thinking about how our culture plays a role in defining our faith. To help me explore this thinking, I need to talk to someone who has a lot of experience with a variety of cultures. So I talked with my brother-in-law, Dale Gordon, who lives in Saskatchewan, Canada. We sat in his dining room, listening to the wind chimes outside and enjoying a cup of iced coffee.
My first degree was theology. My graduate degree was in counseling psychology, and so I went from being a missionary pastor to a therapist, and spent the last 30 years of my life working as a therapist. I think every culture has this view that there is a God figure that you have to place your unquestioning belief in order to please that deity.
Okay.
I think in North America, our view of faith is so skewed by our culture and our affluence and it's really hard for us to determine what faith really means. It's easy to have faith when things are really, you've got a home and a bank account and you've got a job and your kids are doing okay, and you can conjure up all kinds of things that God's doing for you because of your faith. When you think about faith, it's usually based on some kind of a revelation or a voice that God uses to answer our questions and our prayers. You'll hear it all the time. God told me, I heard God say, if my faith is that God is supposed to do certain things when I pray, then I can very easily make up a voice. And all it really is wishful thinking.
This suggests a faith that believes God invariably gives you what you want. That faith is really a belief in a genie who grants your wishes. Is this faith or an attempt at cosmic manipulation?
I think God has already put a system in place for us to meet each other's needs. One of the things God has provided is the ability to have relationships with other people who can also meet our needs.
Century German theologian Martin Luther said this, quote, "Pray like it all depends on God. Then, when you are done, go work like it all depends on you," unquote.
We won't step into the gap because we're waiting for God to.
Oh, good point.
You know, there are people who need us, who need our intervention, us to step in, not wait for God to. But if the whole church is praying for them and they're praying, well, we're all going to wait around till God, sticks that sign down from heaven.
That's a good point.
So. I've seen people who have gone through some of the horriblest experience with the most gentle, kind spirits. There's no bitterness there, but they've experienced horrendous. And it's not because they believed God was going to change their situation. They were, they knew that wasn't going to happen. But there was this quietness of spirit and this steadfastness that said, but I'll be okay. I'll be okay. And I think that's faith.
I'll give the last word to Martin Luther. He wrote, "Faith is permitting ourselves to be seized by the things we do not see." So, what do you think? Is faith an experience?
All of a sudden, I was just filled with the Holy Spirit. You can't really describe it and explain it.
Is faith inherently divisive?
People will push their belief or push their agenda because they honestly believe this is what they are called to do.
Is faith a biological imperative? His conclusion implies that our need to believe is hardwired into us. Or is faith an action expressed in community?
One of the things God has provided is the ability to have relationships.
And now, it's your turn. Share this podcast with someone you would like to have a conversation with. Meet for coffee or the beverage of your choice and talk about faith. Explore the ideas you heard here and maybe some new ideas that came to mind. And thank you for listening. This episode of SplitLights was written by David and Tamara McGinnis. It was edited by David McGinnis, Tamara McGinnis, and Adam Carnes. The music was provided by Storyblocks. Special thanks to Jim Lyman, Jim Velez, and Dale Gordon. You've been listening to SplitLights, a podcast where talk is cheap, but conversation is priceless.